given us all a great and truly precious gift with this new restoration.
Thank you, Margaret, and thank you to Marty. Stephen, what was your initial relationship with Giant? Did you sneak in, or did you pay like a grown-up?
No. My initial relationship with Giant was the first time I saw it on television. Not the best way to see.
That's how George Stevens envisioned it. To be seen on television with commercial breaks and cut down. That was his passion. Yeah.
Well, and his passion was realized with me because it worked on the small screen too. But it is called Giant, and I screened it for myself many, many times. I would just get a 35mm print, and I would sit there in a screening room at Universal where we show all the rushes, and I would just run Giant. I ran Giant. Maybe I've seen Giant on the medium-sized screen about 20 times, but I have seen Giant overall at least 50 times. I'm sure.
George, what do you think it is about this movie that speaks to people, that speaks to 13-year-old boys, that speaks to fully grown film directors?
Well, I think if someone said, that this is an epic film with the most expensive picture that Warner Brothers had made at that time, and about twice as expensive as Jack Warner thought it was going to be, and it was most successful box office picture of Warner's. But for an epic film, someone pointed out, it's really remembered more for the breadth of its humanity. There's so many characters and themes that resonate, and I think that's what's important about it. And also it speaks to themes, including the situation with the Hispanic people in Texas at that time, 1950s, and a strong woman at its center, which were not common, and I think it makes it a very modern film for today.
Do you, in my fantasy world, which you were heavily involved in, Stephen,
I think you should clarify that.
do you and Marty call each other and be like, what do you want to do next? Let's do Giant. Like, how does that process work?
Well, the process, we have a really great process. Margaret and Marty and our board, we all can put names into a hamper to basically discuss which films should be restored. There used to be a lot of urgency with restoration based on nitrate film that was easily flammable and would be, 50% of all the movies ever made have already been destroyed and cannot be found. So it was very, very important. Now, Giant didn't fall into that kind of category, but George Stevens did a very amazing thing with Giant. The entire first third of the film has these long, slow bleed-overs or dissolves from one scene to the next. And they used to do dissolves called optical dissolves. And so years ago, when Giant was first made in 1956, all they had was an optical printer. And when you put anything through an optical printer, the film loses a generation, which means where you see it dissolve, it's grainy. And then when the dissolve is over, it's clear again. And even when they struck the first Blu-ray I saw of Giant, there still was a big issue with all those dissolves. They were still, I thought, a little unacceptably grainy. So this restoration was, the 4K restoration was really to try to correct that and to try to make it blend with the rest of the film, which Warner Brothers, they did, Bob, and they did a great job. And so I called George about a year ago, and I just said, I really like the Blu-ray, I think it's great, but would you mind if we took another pass at it? And George immediately said, do it.
And, there are all kinds of people in the movie world, but Stephen, there's no person busier in Hollywood and has more opportunities to be making more films and raising a family. What really defines certain people, and Marty can be counted in this, is that Stephen has time outside of all of his own endeavors to take it upon himself to say, this film means a lot to film history and I want to do something about it. And I salute you, Stephen, for that. in 1956 in this theater. We all came in, and Rock and Elizabeth and my father had their footprints and handprints put in the cement out there just before the premiere. I want to talk about another occasion with my father that I think speaks to this evening. It involves another film. It was the 1951 Academy Awards. My father came back after 3 years of war, and he made a film with Theodore Dreiser's An American Tragedy called A Place in the Sun. I went to the Academy Awards with my father and my mother and his mother, the actress Georgie Cooper. And I remember Dad was driving the car, and I sat next to him. It was here, the Academy Awards in Chinese theater, and somewhere on there in an aisle, and Joseph Mankiewicz, name familiar, came on the stage. He was then president of the Directors Guild, to announce the award for Best Director. And he said the nominees are John Huston, Asphalt Jungle, an African Queen, Vincent Minnelli, An American in Paris, William Wyler, The Desperate Hours, Elia Kazan, A Streetcar Named Desire, and George Stevens, A Place in the Sun. Well, I don't know if the fix was in, but Joe pulled Dad's name out, and the story is driving home that night. And he was driving the car, and the Oscar was in the seat between us. And I was about, I think, 19 or something, and pretty excited, I guess. And anyway, he looked over. Maybe he thought I was too excited. But he looked at me and he said, he said, we'll have a better idea what kind of a film this is in about 25 years. He was speaking to what the Film Foundation is concerned with, the test of time. And that, and so how touched he would be to see that this wonderful crowd is here tonight, 65 years, not 25 years after its making, and that he had made a film that stood the test of time.
What I took from that story is that it was a pretty easy win that year. Margaret, let me just, what is it, has the process over the last 32 years, Film Foundation founded in 1990, I take it the process of restoring films, just in general, I don't know why I always presume I know what I'm talking about. Is it much easier? Is it harder?
Well, the process has changed because the technology changes, and Giant's a really good example of, a film that has actually been preserved and restored a few times. Because when restoration, began, and the archives were doing it from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and the studios, started doing it a little bit more once the awareness was raised, thanks to Stephen and Marty and directors who really advocated for it. It was all photochemical, so that was the gold standard. Is you would make a film-to-film copy, and so preservation was how we really brought films back to life and made them available for future generations for about, I think, at least 15 years from the first part, first half of the Film Foundation. And when, with the advent of digital technology, there were just these incredible new tools that would allow you to take, for example, like a 3-strip Technicolor film and finally make those color records in accurate registration, so you wouldn't have fringing around characters, and you could, repair scratches and tears that were, they take you out of the film. So, if used with a light touch, digital technology is, an enormous kind of a revolutionary change for film restoration. You can restore films that you wouldn't see otherwise. So Giant was first photochemically preserved in 95 or 96?
Well, no, I think in the 70s first.
Right.
I think I've been involved in 4 restorations. This is the 4th. Yeah.
So I think when we first, started the preservation kind of movement, the idea was let's just restore and preserve everything, right? And then the realization is as the new technology changes and people are, the image quality is so much better on home entertainment, you just keep improving that so that new audiences and new generations will discover these films, and the films are kind of kept up to the current standards.
George, I was in reading your wonderful book, My Place in the Sun, Life in the Golden Age of Hollywood, in Washington. George, by the way, book signing tomorrow at the lobby of the Hollywood Roosevelt at 11 a.m. So, and the book is wonderful, but only if you care about movies. So, reading you had the memo sent from Jack Warner to your father, where he thinks the screenplay's a little long, and he's worried that he says in the memo, like, hey, is there any way, maybe if you, it's great, it's wonderful, but maybe you get it down to, let's listen to it, maybe 2 hours and 20 minutes. Do you think maybe you could get it down to 2 hours? And your dad has a very pleasant reply. They're so nice to each other in the memos, right? We ended up with a movie, at 1.8 million, ends up 5.4 million. The screenplay's how long? 300 and how many pages?
I worked with my father and the writers on the screenplay. I got out of the Air Force from Occidental College. I got a commission to go in the Air Force. And the Korean War ended, so I didn't have anything to do. And my father was just starting Giant. He said, "Well, come with me." So I sat for 7 months with the writers every morning. But we found a typist from Warner Brothers, and we had widening the margins, fewer pages.
But your father had this wonderful reputation of, that I think, I'm sure irritated the Jack Warners of the world, but he had a vision and he had final cut and believed in all that meant, right? So he didn't seem ever swayed, and he ended up with this, again, epic, but masterpiece.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah.
Did he ever? Did he feel? I mean, was there tension? Was there a moment where? Is your sense that your father was like, you know what? I gotta take 30 minutes out of this movie, or Jack Warner's gonna bite my head off?
No, he had a great deal of confidence in this. They worked very hard on the screenplay. It was the only screenplay that he said he really shot. With very few